This Week in History with Will and Mike.
Will, Mike. Hi.
That's the name of the show. That'd be a good name for the show. All right, This Week in History, we are discussing...
That was Mike and Will.
This Week in History, we're discussing Thespis of Icaria. Icaria?
Icaria, I think.
Icaria,
Yeah.
which happened in 534 BC.
Mm-hmm. Specifically, we're talking about an event on November 23rd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, do we need to cover anything from last time?
What did we talk about last time? The council. The Council of Clermont. I don't think so.
Let's move on then.
That was pretty fun, pretty solid, pretty comfortable zone for me to talk
Will
about.
has 1 hour to explain to me what is up with Thespis of Icaria.
What is up with Thespis? Well, Thespis was a man.
Okay, good start. I thought it was a city.
Yep. There's Thebes.
Oh.
Thespis was from Icaria, which is a small town, I believe, outside of Athens. It's hard to tell where some of the older towns are because they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
And in some cases, the modern cities have expanded to such magnitude that they cover them. So they're just like a little district sometimes in the city. But Thespis...
Do they have much written records?
Not a lot back then. Not a lot. Some is chiseled.
Okay.
They had a written word, but it wasn't largely kept.
So they kept records
Lots
like
of wars and stuff.
kept records like the Flintstones.
Right.
Got it.
There were written records at the time too, but a lot of it was kept in wax and on tablets.
Oh yeah.
Not a very long term.
For those of you keeping your files on wax, keep it away from the fire.
Yep. Don't do it in summer. You get your numbers all wrong, especially if you're doing like really fine mathematics or something, and your numbers start to shift, and you're like, is that a 7 or a 1? Where's the decimal point? No, there's a 1.
Dali was a big fan of the wax calculator.
Yes. So, Thespis was an actor, but not just an actor.
Oh.
The first actor in tradition. He's considered the first Western actor.
Oh.
Now, it's important to talk about like what that means because there's lots of acting and stories and all this other stuff, but he was the first guy who took on a singular role in a play, and it was recorded, ever.
Is that the name?
Thespian comes from Thespis.
I figured it out.
Yeah. So
Thespian.
And that's an important thing that was a term that was coined later.
Sure.
But it starts out with this guy because up until this point, so we've got all these different chunks of history, different world histories, and all this acting obviously comes from different places, is done in different ways.
Yeah.
You know, in Japan they have like no theater, they have kabuki, they have these different styles, but those are relatively new because acting for a very long time in, say, Japan was considered, we talked about like the rank structure in society.
Yeah.
That was the lowest. It was like people who dealt with dead stuff and like feces and actors.
Well, good to see that things have changed.
Things have changed, but also in some societies we can kind of gauge like a good time for actors, a golden age of actors type thing is how they're treated. There aren't a lot of golden ages in Japanese history, but recently Japan had kind of a renaissance in acting, you know, in like the 50s and 60s especially, with Akira Kurosawa doing like the Seven Samurai, which made 15 spin-off movies of the Magnificent Seven. That's like a shot-for-shot remake. There's all these other things done. But
that's movie acting.
That's movie acting. It's very, very different. But we got there from this guy.
This guy.
So at the time, Athens is a city of culture. And we're going to talk mostly about Western world acting. So when I'm saying acting, I'm not doing a carpet of everything, because the first theorized acting in this chunk of the world was in 4000 BC, and it was in Egypt, and it was the funerary rites that the priests would do, and it was very theatrical, and they would kind of show what was going to happen in the afterlife, and it was very stylish, and people would watch, and it was to communicate what was going on, but it was kind of part of the funeral service.
I mean, arguably, surely some acting was like even before we had like organized civilizations, people coming back from the hunt and like wearing
telling stories and exactly. So most of the time, though, what those things are referred to is kind of like either just a storytelling of you telling your story. But it's very rare where we find, and before then we have no accounts of somebody taking another person's spot in the story. So this is the first time we have impersonation recorded.
Beyond an animal.
Beyond an animal, or you saying, "Well, when I was out and I did this."
Yeah.
I'm more in the animal.
Right.
But yeah, so we've got all these different cultures of it. But in Greece, that was kind of where acting started to come up, because in Athens you have the city of culture where they're trying to, they're big on building things and telling stories and sharing culture and a history, and that was kind of the center of the Greek world for that. There were other places that had forums and they had ways of telling stories and sharing ideas, but Athens was really kind of the central location, and it was a holy city.
The Broadway of Greece.
It really was. It really was. It was kind of the New York of Greece. It was a big port city, and it was, even though it wasn't right on the water. It's kind of weird how they were like very famous for their ships.
Yeah.
Not on the water. 23 miles from there.
Really?
Ish. Yeah. That's why they had the marathon.
Oh.
Marathon is exactly as far as it takes to get from the beach to Athens.
I feel like we'll talk about it later.
That's another time.
Excuse the cat.
It's Mr. Pitters telling us
He's excited about theater.
he's excited about theater. Come on to be in the film, Mr. Krabby.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, every year the city of Athens would have what was called, I want to make sure I pronounce it right, a Dionysia or a Dionysia.
Okay.
So Dionysus or Dionysus or
Goddess
however you want to pronounce it.
God of wine.
Partying.
Partying.
God of partying, good times, a few other things.
Grapes.
Grapes. So he's usually made part of, like, Bacchus was the Roman version.
Okay, yeah.
They had like a bacchanal, but it's usually like he's kind of a god of just kind of cutting loose and doing whatever you want to do. But he's also a god of just general celebration, having a good time. You may be having you had a good year.
Yeah.
So
not all parties have to be
it doesn't have to all just be like
a bacchanal and revel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to just be like an orgy of everything.
Sometimes we can just shake hands.
Sometimes
we don't need to have an orgy.
Sometimes it can just be music and chilling and talking and having some wine, maybe.
Yeah.
Then later on, maybe.
Sure. Well, yeah.
But they'd have like daytime festivals. You want the kids to be able to be involved.
Yeah.
They're not involved in the orgy part.
No, classically, no.
Classically. Although
They shouldn't. Don't. That's not even.
classical
not even-
Greece
that's
had some
not-
problems with
that's
that,
not-
but we're not gonna.
We've got other things to talk about.
We're not. That's not the subject matter, because Thespis was an adult man.
Yes.
And every year at the Dionysia, the city celebration, they would have like a theater contest, and it was kind of a talent show. You
Okay.
come in and you do your thing. You say, "This is my story," and you either had like something planned out, and it was usually what they would do is they'd take classic Greek stories. So they'd take their mythology, talk about Zeus
Sure.
fighting against the Titans and all the other gods and their achievements. They like to talk about history.
Now, actually, I feel I'm belaboring the point about where things were written down. So when these people tell these, are these just oral tradition stories, or
Largely oral tradition. Okay. There were some, like I said, so there were some things that were written down. So at this point,
it just takes a long time to write
it
things
takes
down.
a long time to write things down.
If you've seen the Flintstones,
Yes. And there were like scroll work.
all right.
They did write other things down because we still have some texts that were written from before this, not maybe in their original form. But some things were written down, but mostly oral tradition.
Right.
But at this time we have the Odyssey and we have the Iliad. So
classics.
those are already created, and those are 200 years old at this point.
Oh, okay.
Because Homer was around 750 BC.
Okay.
Is roughly when he's...
So they're old classics.
They're old, yeah. They're really, really, really old.
Yeah.
And they would tell these stories, but the way they told them is they had the chorus. And the chorus was a group of people kind of telling the story together.
Okay.
And you'd occasionally have somebody step forth to carry part of the chorus forward, but it was all very much a group effort. It wasn't just, one person taking it out.
So that's in Greek theater as well, right? This is Greek theater.
Greek
you're saying?
theater. Yep.
Would they all like speak at the same time, like the same words?
A lot of them, yes. It was like syncopated, rhythmic.
That feels like it would be harder to hear, but
Yep. It wasn't like the easiest thing in the world.
although I guess you slow down.
Think of it like if you go and watch a choir.
Sure.
and they're all singing the same exact note at the same exact time.
Right.
It's
I was
not
thinking
so
like a
bad.
choir singing Gilbert and Sullivan, and that doesn't help me at all.
No,
That
not
just makes things more
they're just going
complicated.
all over the
A lot
place.
of people singing real fast.
These guys are all singing the melody in a
Okay.
way so you can hear it, and that was largely done as a way to remember it.
Okay,
You have a
sure.
rhyming scheme, you have a musical scheme. For most people, that's in that kind of a thing. It's a lot easier to memorize it.
Can you imagine the drama within the chorus? I get to move up to the front row of the chorus this year.
Yes.
Oh, he didn't give me second row because he's bitter about
Got
last
some
month.
guy sabotaging another guy's
Yeah.
sandals before he
Yeah.
goes in. He'll never be in the front row again.
And then you're also like you're in the course. You're learning the things as you go too.
Yeah.
Then, right? So you can.
Yep, you had the groups that were
Sure.
the learners, and then you had the old hats, the old pros.
Yeah.
Well, then this guy Thespis comes along,
Hey everyone.
allegedly. Now, again, records aren't super written
Sure,
down then.
yeah,
You
okay.
had some stuff written down in some places, but usually that was like, we're going to hammer this out later.
Yeah.
And we don't need to keep scrolls.
Right.
It wasn't. I don't know why. It was just not so
Time consuming.
time consuming, and just they didn't have the process.
Okay.
Whereas Egypt is like, you guys don't do paper? What's wrong with you? We've had paper for 2,000 years.
I guess if you haven't been working with paper, maybe
You don't realize what
Yeah.
you're missing
Yes, yeah.
until you don't have it.
Yeah.
But so Thespis had a different idea for his performance, and instead of him having a chorus group, he came on stage and he performed as somebody specifically by himself. This was up to then unheard of. Again, according to tradition, because
Sure.
maybe there are just unrecorded versions of all these
Someone
things
else may have
happening.
done this.
Somebody
who
may have
knows?
done it remotely. This is the first recorded, like, somebody actually went, oh!
Oh, that's
And
different.
So maybe other people did it, but maybe they just weren't very good.
Some Greek critic.
Yep.
Not since.
Yep.
Not
not
since.
since,
Have we had a?
not since ever have we had somebody perform like this.
Says I, the first critic.
Says I. Well, if history of the world taught us anything, it's that the world's first artist immediately was followed by
Yes,
the first
exactly.
art critic.
Yeah.
So first play had a critic.
I'm sure it
some
did.
guy just, this is terrible.
What does that Thespis think he's doing?
Exactly. And I'm sure there were like the old school
Oh,
chorus
sure.
people like, no, I don't like this. I don't like this at
Yeah.
all. He's changing the game. But he went on, and it's not specific what play it was.
Okay.
They say probably didn't care because they were probably just like,
Oh, sure.
this is awesome. But he went on and he played a specific role. And this was the first time that is recorded that there was an impersonation of a character by one person with no chorus
Oh, okay.
playing that same character or chanting as something back and forth. He played this person. And he won the award for the year.
Ooh.
And he was the best guy there. They thought that was amazing.
Do we know the award was?
They just said he was the winner of the Dionysia. The
No, I didn't
event.
know if it was anything specifically.
No, they don't have like an
Money
Oscar.
or an ox.
Yeah, it's an Oscar, but it's spelled like with a K.
Oh,
It's
sure.
very,
Oscar.
Oscar. Very, very Greek-looking,
yeah.
little dots on it,
Sure,
and
sure.
of course, in bronze.
Yep. We're in a
gotta be.
toga. Toga? Is that Greek?
They had togas.
Okay.
Ish, toga-ish. It was.
I feel like the Romans perfected
Sure
the
thing.
toga.
Romans perfected it. Well, the Romans stole pretty much everything from the Greeks, which is where we're going to go from here. because-
Allegedly, all right.
Because we know so little about Thespis, but his legacy is,
Yeah.
more than 2,500 years old.
Well, what did he think was going to happen, by the way? He's acting as somebody else. No one's going to know who he is.
Yeah, he probably thought. I mean, and this is just conjecture at the time, but there was a risk,
Yeah.
If people really didn't like it or he offended, like the
Sure.
ruling class, he could have been killed.
Was it also seen perhaps as taboo, like you are?
It was. That's why people didn't do it. But he did it in a way that was respectful and well done, obviously, or he'd be dead.
I meant more so like I feel like maybe it was more spiritual or whatever. Like, oh, you're embodying this person's soul.
No. That's
Yeah.
taboo. Yeah, I think that's the proper term for that.
I thought
It's
just
like
like afraid of offending too. I mean,
right.
if you
Yeah.
did the guy wrong.
Yeah, you don't want to offend, but also it's like, are you
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
There's all these different questions that had to be asked because people just hadn't done this before. publicly on the stage. Maybe you're
Yeah.
telling a story, you do a quick imitation of your friend. Oh yeah,
Sure. Yeah.
this guy is over here.
That's why most
Murata
people,
just told the funniest story. He was all like, "Blah, blah, blah," and I was like, no way.
I mean, most people's imitations of somebody else is just, I'm a super good.
Yeah, exactly. It's not terribly flattering. This, apparently, it was well done enough that
Okay.
people were like, oh, good.
So
If
his
you're
first
gonna do
time
it, you did it good.
wasn't, I am the king, I'm the king.
He just walks
yeah.
up and he's, who's in charge here? You? You suck. Let me do an impression of you sucking. Oh, he's a sword. I don't know how it works. Blah.
Kill him. No, I'm acting. I'm just
He
acting.
just walks in. He's like, let me do an impersonation of the Spartans for you. First stand-up comic. Also dead.
Yeah.
Like on this. So he knew his target audience. He knew what he was trying to convey.
Okay.
And he kept it light enough. And this is all assumption, but we know enough about like Greek culture of what was taboo and what was not something you usually joked about. You don't joke about the gods. You don't, because they're very strong at this
Sure.
point. There's a lot of worship down
And
at this point.
they don't have a real good sense of humor, I found.
No.
The gods.
Nope.
Not really lenient about that.
Nope. And that would, to maintain the mystery of it, you'd make sure the priests didn't have a sense of humor
Oh, sure.
either.
Yeah.
You know, so it wasn't like, I'm going to offend the gods and Zeus literally throws a lightning bolt. It's I offended the gods, and the priest comes up and goes, nope, no. Ha! Their version of the lightning bolt is a spear.
I had
shaped
thought
like
there
a
was
lightning
going to be less killing in this episode.
There's because this doesn't happen.
It has been less.
Yeah. I mean, considering, let's see, last time was Crusades, the time before that was genocide. See, we're better. This is
We're
much
better.
better.
All right,
This
fair
is
enough.
theoretical killing. No killing took place here.
Okay.
Because Thespis did a good job. If he didn't do a good job, that would have been recorded.
So, another argument that there may have been some guy beforehand.
Yes.
who didn't
Maybe
do as
didn't
good.
do a good
And
job.
Thespis was watching going, I see what he did wrong.
Thespis was actually the first critic.
Right,
Because he
yeah.
took everything and he went,
Oh, I see. All right, I'm going to do this better.
that's where you went wrong. I can do better. I can do better. And he clearly did. So, there were plays that were attributed to Thespis, and I didn't bother to write them down because they were found to be not written by him, and they were forgeries
Oh, okay.
from later Greeks who said, oh, this has got to be from Thespis. And they just kind of wrote his name at the bottom.
Okay.
And said, Thespis wrote this. It was probably to make those stories more popular.
Sure.
The first guy wrote this, so we've got to put on the play.
Oh, yeah.
It's like finding William Shakespeare's lost plays or something, and then you draw in the crowd. Oh, this was a Shakespeare, and you're like, no, there was no King Jim. That's not a thing.
King Jim.
King Jim. Ah, yes, Will Shakespeare's lost play, King Jim. We remember it well. Although that King James was a
King
patron
James
of
was
his.
a-
It was a
I was gonna
patron
say,
of his.
you're not far off.
But
Jim's wrong name.
I feel like if he wrote King Jim,
King Jim.
he would not have been his patron.
King Kevin, maybe?
Yeah, King Kevin, King Todd, King Tyler. Oh God, King Kyle.
Ooh.
he just drinks Monster and punches drywall all day long. King Kyle and Queen Karen, 2 peas in a pod. All right, so Thespis' legacy though is that he is this first actor, and he is considered the inventor of tragedy.
Oh.
So that is what was really a big deal about it, was he didn't do a comedic performance, he didn't do something silly, he did a tragedy. And this was the first time that this is why he won this award. This is why he won this event. It was because it was apparently very moving, and he embodied the characters very well, and he wrote for other people to also be in his plays after this. But he's considered kind of the creator of this movement, because otherwise you were just telling like mythological stories. He was famous for singing what are called dithyrambs,
Dithrums?
which is telling Greek myths to music.
Oh, okay.
And he was very renowned for that. Like you did that. It's kind of think of it like a Catholic church. They have the cantor who's like la 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 la, and then everybody goes la 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 la. That.
Okay.
That's kind of, it's like a call and answer kind of a thing. It was very common, but not embodying the thing. You're telling the story.
Yeah.
And you have the chorus helping you tell the story. So he took parts of that, and then he just went, "Nah, I'm just going to tell the story, but as the person, instead of a third-person narrative, a
Okay.
first-person narrative. And that changed things. So then after this, you have kind of a revolution within Greek storytelling then, where they start going, oh, we could do that. That's an interesting perspective. Instead of, because in like the Iliad and in the Odyssey, it's all third person. It's all, this is what happened, allegedly. This is all the storytelling. And it's also very fascinating that the results are of this oral storytelling is very well maintained. There's not that telephone issue where he said this and then you say something else and then it gets progressively worse. It was considered a very high honor to be the one to carry these messages through time. You know, you're memorizing these stories, this history, so you had to have a very particularly trained mind.
Okay.
And a lot of devotion to it, and that was all you did.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, you know, nowadays where if you want to be a writer, you better get a job and then also be a writer. Right. It was...
However, these actors are still the lowest rung of...
In some places. Here is not so bad. In Greece, not so bad. In Greece, acting was considered useful because you were telling, you were maintaining history.
Yeah.
It's equivalent of being a history teacher.
Okay.
And art was considered valuable.
Yeah. The Greek.
Yeah. Most of the Greek cities. I mean, the Spartans, less so.
Right.
If you weren't stabbing something, you're...
No, they were neat and tidy and had focus.
Yes.
On one thing.
Neat and tidy, stab all the things. That was their focus. The Athens, though, was more about art, trade, and trying out new things.
Yeah.
And if they didn't work, they just didn't do them anymore. And they fixed it. They came up with something new. And that was... It's kind of cool because, you know, at this chunk of history, there's a lot of stuff that just hasn't been done.
Right.
So you're kind of on the cusp no matter what. Like, you're the cutting edge no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm going to just play a person.
Bold.
With a
bold
chorus?
new choice.
No.
Mm.
Like, you're going to be the gods? That's sacrilege. No. I'm just going to be my neighbor. But your neighbor's your neighbor. Yeah, I'm just going to play him.
Just for a little bit.
I don't understand.
Huh.
Very fascinating concept of... Because we were so used to it. You know, we've done plays together.
Yeah.
You write plays.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine
It's a thing you
that
can do.
never having been a thing up until this time. Whereas nowadays, if we tried to, like, write a Greek chorus, it's very complicated because we haven't ever done that.
Oh, sure.
Like, forever. I don't know the last time that a traditionally Greek chorus was used.
I don't think I've ever seen.
It's...
Anytime I've seen a play that utilizes a chorus, like even like a Greek chorus, they do it in some
a weird way.
modern weird way.
Yep.
Like
You don't see the traditional way. I think they still do it sometimes in opera.
Sure, I'm sure.
But
Someone does it.
but
Someone
largely,
acts
it's kind of considered passe and boring, and it's not very interesting. It just kind of come forward, oh, this thing happened, then they go back, oh, this thing happened, then they go back. It's not a very interesting concept. But at the time, I was all the rage, and now here comes Thespis, and he does his own thing. So we start to see this evolution of acting, and that's most of what I'm going to talk about, because that's really all the information we have on Thespis.
Oh,
Is
okay.
he was there, and he
did
did a
his
thing, and it was memorable, and somebody had to mark it down that this happened, and it was immortalized, and then there's not a lot more information.
His career went way down.
He was a one-hit wonder for all we know. He could have either lived high on the hog for the rest of his life as a local legend, or he did that one thing and then died of typhus the next day. Like, we're not really 100%.
Or he could have had a performance career, and we just don't know.
And we just don't know a lot about it because, again, writing stuff down wasn't really a thing. It was largely passed through thing. But also, this is when we start to have written scripts.
Oh, okay.
That was another thing that he was kind of that is attributed to him, is the writing of scripts and handing them out to the actors to do different things and take on different roles, as opposed to everybody do the thing.
Yeah.
This was written out, so you had your thing and you had notes and you changed ideas around, and that was starting to come into the fore. But it's kind of it's new technology, so it's not quite refined. This system, this idea, this way of doing things. So we don't have his plays.
Well, I would imagine too, if you're assigning different people roles, you think they would just write down, and if it's difficult to write stuff down, just write down your lines, give you your lines.
Yeah, and that continued
Write down my lines, I got my lines.
for centuries.
So
that
no
was
one
the
collected
thing.
the actual
Right.
whole play.
You don't have the whole thing. He was just like, you say this, you say this, and you say this. You do these things. And then he was usually in the place because he was the innovator who came up with the idea, and people were like, how do you do that? oh, you do the thing. You just wander around doing
Yeah.
the thing. Okay. But yeah, so we don't have his like list of actual plays, and like I said, the plays that were attributed to him, they found out they came out way later, like after he died, probably,
Yeah.
and not all at once. Kind of like how Homer's given credit for the Iliad and the Odyssey, but they think maybe they weren't written at the same time or by the same person,
Oh.
and maybe the more of a concept of Homer as opposed to an actual physical person. This could have been several people telling a story.
Right.
And that was the problem with their earlier storytelling as well, and their earlier theater performances. It was kind of a communal effort. You know, because you want to all preserve the history.
Yeah.
15 people remembering it, a lot better than one guy. Because
Easier.
that's that secondhand, like, information of, well, he says it happened, but he's the only one who said it, so he can change it throughout history.
I was a little distracted. I'm sorry.
No,
I was trying to look up. There's an Italian playwright. He wrote plays like The Servant of Two Masters, and The Liar is one, I think, and another. He's written some classic plays. I think his name is Carlo. Carlos. Doesn't sound Italian. I was trying to look it up. We can look it up later. But from what I heard, is he was just like it was like a traveling group, and they were doing Commedia dell'arte where they were improvising
I was
shows.
going to talk about that.
Okay.
That's,
It's the same guy. And then
that's coming up later. Not necessarily that guy, but you
Yeah.
keep telling me the story.
Well, he was just like the stage manager of that theater company who wrote the stuff down. Like
That was his
they
job.
Yeah,
This is what you did.
he
This is
does.
what you did.
Yeah, and
This is
then
what you did.
he's credited as writing the play, even though perhaps I don't know how.
Right, yeah. If it was a group effort,
Yeah.
you as the scribe,
The one guy wrote it down. He gets the credit for writing
he
it
gets the
down.
credit for writing it
Yeah.
down. Yep. It's kind of like you're the stenographer.
Yeah.
You get credit. I took down all the notes. You weren't necessarily doing any of the cool stuff,
But it might have been. I don't know.
but you might have been.
All right. Either way, I've jumped ahead.
No, yeah, you have. How dare you?
I was excited by history.
Almost 2,000 years.
Whoops.
But there's not a huge amount that happens in between there because
Theatrically,
Theatrically
surely
speaking.
some things.
Oh
happen.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff, and we've talked about a bunch of it. But theatrically, there's less. So what happens eventually is the Romans start to develop as a city. And
The Romans.
The Romans. They
as a
develop as
city.
a city and a culture.
A city-state.
City-state, I
yeah,
should say.
yeah.
The Romans, because they started off as mud huts,
As we all do.
while Athens is marble.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Rome is not really a thing
Okay.
right now.
Hey, what do they got?
I'm gonna quick double check the founding of Rome. As a
What do they
city.
got over there? That looks nice.
Rome.
I'm happy with our mud huts. I don't want no fancy marble. You know how much upkeep is for that marble?
So I was wrong. Rome has been around since apparently it's founded April 21st, 753 BC. Okay,
Whoops.
So I was wrong. I
Yeah.
was wrong. I can admit I was wrong. Okay, so Rome has been around for 200 years at this point. However, Rome is, I mean, that's when it was found.
Right.
It's not necessarily when it was not Rome.
Right. I don't know the specific dates, but I do know that Greece culture developed to its level first.
Yep.
And then
the
Rome came
Romans
along later.
come along and they see this cool thing and
Yeah.
they're like,
Yeah.
mine. And that's literally what happens. The Romans start to conquer chunks of Greece and start to take bits and pieces of the culture because they find that it works better. Because I think, for the first chunk of Rome's history, it's just a bunch of a bunch of towns on hills
7 hills. To be
beating the
precise.
snot out of each other, and then eventually encompassing all the hills, and then eventually putting walls around those, and then walls around those, and walls around those. But they spend a huge amount of their early history just beating the crap out of each other and their neighbors. In Italy. They don't get out of Italy for a long time.
Yeah, they had some stuff to work out.
And they had to work some stuff out. So they finally encounter Greek culture, and they're like, this is awesome! They have stuff we like. They work in more stone than we're used to. They have theater. They don't just go and stab their neighbors. I mean, they do,
Yeah.
but they don't just do that. They have other options as well, so that's
Sure.
pretty cool. So they take the concept of Greek theater, which is developed now after Thespis, into having actors. And they kind of split it into two different types of theater.
Okay.
They have high theater and they have low theater.
Which one do I prefer?
Yes. So high theater is almost exclusively tragedy. It is high art. It is theater,
Yep.
not theater. It is performed for the wealthy, usually.
That's why comedies don't get Oscars. usually.
Usually. And that's why they had to have a special category for him now.
Oh,
Yeah,
in the Golden Globes.
I think Oscars, it's like the best actor in a comedy is a thing now.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like comedy or musical.
Oh, okay.
It's its own...
Which, by the way, are two different things.
Totally different things. Lots of musicals aren't funny. Like
Yeah.
Les Miserables. How does that relate to...
A lot of comedians can't sing.
Yep.
I don't know why those got connected.
I don't either. It's just the...
I guess because they're not tragedies, except Les Mis. Never mind. That theory fell apart right away.
Your theory's gone. Your theory's
quick.
gone. It's literally in the name. The Miserable. That's...
Yeah.
So... If you guys have an answer, I have a theory
that
the Oscars are just political and
there's
largely nonsense about,
that might be true.
moving up in the echelons of the Hollywood culture.
Sure.
It's less about what is actually the best,
Yes.
or more popular, and people make it sound like that's a new thing. That's literally the history of awards for everything ever.
Yes.
Is based on you're popular amongst a certain group of elite, wealthy, landed nobility type folks who make these decisions.
Yes.
Whatever.
So we have in ancient Greece.
But in ancient Greece,
we have high theater.
We have high theater developing in Rome.
Oh, okay.
Because Greece kind of lumps it all together.
Oh, okay.
Theater's
theater.
Theater's theater. What's today? Comedy, tragedy, something in between, a little bit of both. What are we doing? Whereas in Rome, it's you do this type of theater in this place, and you do this type of theater in this place.
Okay.
Because this type of theater is fancy, and this type of theater is dirty.
Oh.
So they separated into tragedy.
But which was more fun? No, we'll get there.
And then the low theater is considered vulgar.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of, like, sexuality. There was a lot of... they would just use, like, prostitutes for the female characters a lot of the time.
There's acting involved, I guess.
Yep. They were lewd women. So they'd come out, naked and do stuff. Some of it was downright pornographic by description. It's pretty... You couldn't get away with this kind of theater outside of Vegas. You could totally do it in Vegas. Right. But this was actually...
Perhaps at Caesar's Palace.
Amongst the plebes, the plebeians, the poor folk, who were the overwhelming majority of Roman citizens, very popular.
Yeah.
And even some members of the Senate would go there.
Sure.
It was fun.
Did you go see the sex show?
They didn't care. It was lighthearted romps, and this is when we start to see actors not treated with any respect at all.
Oh.
Because if you were associated with that kind of act, you're trash. Like, that was their viewpoint. I'm not saying that my viewpoint.
Sure.
But that was, if you were associating with lewd women on the stage, you're as bad as the company you keep.
I've come to see your show 7 times this week. You're disgusting.
You're disgusting.
I love it. Get out of here. This place is for civilized people.
Exactly. This is improper. How dare you? And that was kind of the thing. And it was used to, you take this nice form of art, and then you start to try to divide people, like having sports and then having teams divided, and which the Greeks also did, because originally team sports were based on which city you came from.
Okay.
And that's where the Olympians, the Olympics came from. That was the first, okay, well, rather than just kill each other, let's sports at each other. And so the Romans now are starting to divide their own people.
Let's sports at each other.
Yep.
And then in the 80s, they tried, instead of let's kill each other, let's have rap battles and breakdancing.
I can't do that. I'm kind of glad we can still solve some problems with violence, because I can at least punch somebody in the nose and run away.
I kind of wish the breakdancing had taken on.
You know what? I feel like if it had, our culture would be so different. I feel like I'd be much more happy about things. I'd be like, oh no, let's just dance off.
Instead of a war, a big army of dancers.
I think it'd be a way better. You'd just have one.
Well, you'd have your champion.
You'd have your champion.
Yeah, but you'd also
and you'd have like the champion team, and you just have competitions to determine who's gonna go against it, and then it'd just be like the Olympics, because China would be like, well, we start them when they're 2, and we train them, and we pump them full of drugs. Well, that's the Russians. We pump them full of drugs.
Maybe this is allegedly all. I don't know. We've gone way off the track.
We've gone so far off, but we're having fun. We're having fun. This is the Thanksgiving special.
That's true. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. And that doesn't mean pilgrims doing horrible things. It just take some time to be thankful for the things that you love. Family, friends, silly podcasts, or serious ones. So,
This podcast would be in the, I don't know what column, tragedy.
This
it's not tragedy.
specific one would go in the comedy,
Okay.
I think, because this is the most serious we got was allegedly maybe stabbing one person.
Ah.
That is the lightest we've ever been.
Okay.
And it's probably just going to get worse because
doesn't
most
matter.
of history is just framed in violence. So the Romans have developed this kind of a two-part thing.
Yes.
So even back then, we know like the two-part system is not a great way of running things
Yeah.
because it kind of creates a wedge between the different groups. Maybe a person watching a tragedy would enjoy a comedy, but they're probably not going to go because you associate the worst-case scenario of these low theater bits with all of them.
Yeah.
So the lewdest, most crude, vulgar, but these guys were like kind of before a court jester was a thing. They were making fun of the political elite.
The low
class guys.
Right.
They would make fun of everybody.
I'm assuming
they didn't care if you were Julius Caesar. They'd make fun of you. With mixed results.
Sure.
But usually
Depends on the crowd, I guess.
the people were usually considered so contemptible that they were beneath notice. They just didn't even care. The actors. They were just like, you don't even matter. I don't care what you say and do. Now, if a political rival said the exact same thing, probably try to whack him.
Oh, sure.
But
because it matters.
Yeah.
They have weight. How did the audiences receive the
well,
the
it
political
kind of
stuff?
depended because it's a lot like today nowadays. You know,
Okay.
your audience can start to take on the beliefs of the thing. So if you've got somebody watching something and that's all they watch, maybe that's their only source of information. So maybe they've watched these comedies and they're like, yeah, Julius Caesar has a teeny tiny peenie, and he's ruled by this random Gaul, and
Oh, yeah?
just
You're living in a bubble. Cite your sources.
yeah. I'm gonna write my own play and count, and that was what happened too.
Okay.
Is they would have plays about each other,
Oh.
and then they'd counter each other's plays, and that started in Greece, where you'd have like a famous playwright. I'm trying to remember, like I think Socrates was a playwright, and you know he'd write something, and then other people would go, no, that guy's an idiot. And they'd write a counter play, and they'd argue their points out in theater, which is pretty fun.
It's not a bad idea
That's
either.
a pretty great idea. Imagine if politicians had to write a play, but you have to write it. You can't have an intern write it.
Right. Or your other option is to break dance.
Or your other option is to break
These
dance.
are your options.
Or we'll probably come up with another fun one by the end. We can come up. We can be open ended on this. We can be open-ended. But not violence. Violence not allowed. Otherwise, you just elect like Arnold Schwarzenegger type guys for everything.
I know this is an impossibility. We already let the genie out of the bottle with guns and swords, even.
Yep.
But can you imagine a world where we didn't have weapons, but conflicts were solved by art-offs?
I would love that. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I just sing at people.
I don't know what the world would even look like, though. I think it would be. I don't know.
I don't know.
Would it be more aggressively artsy?
Probably. You'd have people walking around with pallets just,
Yeah.
oh yeah? Oh yeah? Well, so there. It would be the life.
Tough guys coming to a bar and dancing.
Yep. Oh god, just Terry Crews everywhere.
Yeah. Oh.
This sounds delightful. This sounds like a future this is a future I can believe in. Terry Crews I think he'd be president.
Yeah.
Because he's a brilliant artist. He can act, and he's a dancing guru. That President Terry Crews.
Terry Crews for president.
Just figured it out. Figured it out.
Terry, if you're watching,
Terry,
get back to us.
You got our vote. Let us run your campaign.
CRUEUEU.
I think it's crew like the crew of a
Rowing
ship.
crew. Yeah.
I think it's CREWS. Cruise.
Taking the notes for the.
Take it down.
All
Take it down.
important to take notes. For
Which,
the show.
Actually is kind of funny because in Idiocracy,
Yeah.
he is the president.
Is that Terry Crews?
That's Terry
what I was
Crews.
going to say that.
Yep.
But I didn't. I wasn't sure.
Camacho.
Yeah.
Yep. So, in Rome, though,
Yes.
they solve all their problems with violence and money.
That does make a
Sounds-
more definitive solution, though. I mean, it is,
Yeah, I mean, you've got nobody to run against.
the
because
guy's
they're
dead. Who did the better rap battle? I don't know.
Doesn't matter.
He's dead. That's what I know.
You spoke beautifully. And the Romans did do this too, though. Was a key thing within the Senate was being, and this is also coming from Thespis. Was the Romans took this idea of acting, and then they focused more on the voice.
Okay.
Like the specific ability of the speaker. And then they said, well, what if we don't just do this for entertainment? What if we do this to evoke a political movement?
Oh.
And that's when they really start building up the concept of the orator.
Oh.
And the Greeks were doing this too. So this is not like the Romans invented this, but it was the idea of you have to be a really good speaker to have a good political career.
So previous political campaign, there weren't political campaigns.
Not really,
per se.
no.
It was...
I mean, in Greece, it was everybody had a say because it was a pure democracy, depending on where you were. Athens was a democracy. So if you fit the criteria of being like a free citizen of Athens, you had a say.
Okay.
And you'd go in and talk. And it was like being a stockholder in a business. You all have a say. If you were a Spartan, you did not. You had to be the king. He was in charge of everything.
Okay.
You did not have a unified democracy. That's why there's this concept of Greece as this unified thing. It was not a unified country. It was a mess of different city-states and values.
City-states.
Yes.
I remember that term.
Yeah, the city-states. Which then Italy, it's kind of funny because that's how Greece started, and then Rome became an empire, and then Greece became a kingdom, and Rome became city-states when Rome fell.
Oh.
Wow, it's almost like history's a circle. And
It's almost like the Greeks had it right the first time.
Yep. Which is kind of how they actually run Greece now, as the islands are all kind of different.
Oh, okay.
Like the laws in Crete, totally different than in Athens.
Sure. Oh, makes sense.
They just kind of do their own thing.
Okay.
But also, Crete kind of has this attitude of, try and make us. We'll fight you. We don't care. We fought the Nazis. We'll fight you. We fought the Ottomans. We'll fight you. We don't care. That just seems, that's their attitude in Crete. It's kind of
I don't think the Cretes have a Scottish accent.
No,
but
no. I will fight you. That's it. All Scots down in Crete. Everyone knows that. If you have anybody play a Cretan
Yep.
in
Scottish
film, they're
Cretan.
always Scottish or Irish pretending to be Scottish.
Yep. Classically.
Classically. You have to.
God, I've lost where we were.
I forgot to. No. So, the concept of the orator, the speaker.
Yeah.
So Thespis is this guy who kind of launches this idea of he had this allegedly kind of a magnetic personality. He was worth watching. That's why he won this award. So this was taken, and then the Greeks would use this with like philosophical debate. And they do this in front of people at like parties, and it was entertaining. People just watch guys argue. You'd have Socrates and Aristotle, and they'd talk about these ideas, not at the same time. I think Aristotle is Socrates' student.
Yeah.
But they were philosophers. They also wrote plays. They did all these different things. Sophocles was a playwright, though. I think that's the one I'm thinking of. But I also think Socrates wrote plays. Anyway, they started to take the concept of these speaking about things and making, like, public speaking became like a thing.
Huh.
And you just tell your idea to people, and people would watch and be fascinated. So the Romans take this up a notch, and they go, what if we added poetry to it? What if we added a little style? Little seasoning.
Yeah, that's right.
Was that Turkish chef?
Yeah.
The little salt off the arm kind of thing.
I read about him.
Yeah.
He sells steaks for a lot of money
A
now.
lot of money. He's very good with a knife and spices, apparently, but I don't want his elbow spice. I just don't. I don't. That's not
That's
appealing.
the best spice.
That's the best spice? I gotta try it then. It's so popular now, it's in anime.
Yeah.
They do that in anime now. It's very funny.
He's got restaurants all over. He's not at.
No, he does his
one
own
man.
thing. Yep, I've just seen him though. He walks around with knives all over him. He just.
Sure.
If you know his name, put it in the comments, because I don't.
I don't know off the top of my head. I did just look him up because the
My
price
girlfriend
of the
was
steaks.
just talking about him too.
Someone was complaining about how expensive his steaks were.
Well, he's
Or
super famous and fancy. That'd
Yeah.
be like complaining about Chef Gordon Ramsay's steaks being expensive. Of course they are.
you can complain about whatever you want to
You
complain.
complain about, but you can. You totally can. It doesn't matter how ridiculous it is. If you don't want to do it, don't buy it.
There you go.
And that's something that we're going to talk a little bit about with the orators too. Though is you had these guys who were largely so Rome comes from warfare. A lot of countries do, but the Romans had nailed it down to a science.
Yeah.
Like watching the Romans, if you have an overhead view of how the Roman military moves, it is a machine. It's, the guys in the front stab until they're tired, and then they file back, and then the next rank takes over, and that kind of a thing. And it's this machine. And this is largely how politics goes in Rome, too. And they take to this, whereas what's great about the Roman culture, what made it great, is they could take something, absorb it, adapt, and put it in a Roman way.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just going, I like that, but going, I like that, now let's Romanize it.
Not saying Rome. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why Rome was a city of 1 million people in like 200 BC. It was just
from
adapting. And that's why like people go there and trade or try to work out deals with them. So the Romans could take this idea of theater and they start to adapt into politics. And you get one of the greatest speakers of all time, one of the greatest writers of all time, Cicero. Now Cicero is a legend. There are books of his still because his words were so powerful. And he was never I think he was consul once, maybe twice. But he was not the tyrannical ruling class. He was not a famous warrior. He did have to soldier because that's how you had to do that if you're a Roman.
Yep.
You always had to be a soldier.
That's how we keep an army in place.
Yep.
Everyone's got to do it.
Everyone's got to do it. And you start having respect about like going to war
Sure.
if you have to be in it. You don't just go, let's just go to war.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got to go. Oh,
then maybe we should talk
about this first. But Cicero is one of his most famous acts is to be defiant to new regimes. He was an outright famous opponent of Julius Caesar all the time. Even after Caesar won the Civil War and Cicero fought on the wrong side and was forgiven, he was still opposed to Caesar in a lot of ways. A little less publicly because he was like, okay, I'm on a thin ice now.
Did dodge a bullet there.
On thin ice now. And then he continues with these brazen speeches, and he was respected by everybody, like just because he was so good at speaking.
Yeah.
And he could talk about anything and make it sound amazing or horrible. And he would always talk about the spirit of Rome and all these brilliant ideas. And if he was on your side, he was like the best guy to have on your side.
Oh, sure. Talk his way out, if anything.
Right. So when Caesar dies, and he dies, murdered, he's murdered.
Effectively, so
50 some odd people in the Senate stab you. You didn't just like fall down and die. You got murdered.
When Caesar ran into his unfortunate accident.
It was a terrible accident. He got stabbed in the back about 57 times.
He fell on 50 daggers.
There was all these knives just sitting there.
What are we going to do?
He was at a knife show, and he tripped and he fell, and it happened.
We vow to have a knife closet to keep those things safe.
Yeah, and
not store them on the floor like we had
going to
them.
pass it. And now speaking on the subject is Cicero.
Oh.
So Cicero continues to kind of... He calms down a little bit for a little while because after Caesar... eventually becomes there's this new triumvirate. There's Octavian, who becomes Augustus.
Yep.
There is
Marcus
Lepidus, and then there's Mark Antony. And Antony is a savage by comparison to these other dudes because he has done nothing but soldier his entire life, and he worked himself up from almost nothing to being Julius Caesar's right-hand man, and he is a holy terror to these guys. Like, Octavian is a very, 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 very wealthy kid when he kind of starts to come into his own. Lepidus is considered kind of the... he's like the fifth wheel. He's not really necessary. He's just there to make it look like they have a triumvirate. We got a triumvirate. And Antony studied under Caesar, so he knows all of his military tactics as well as social tactics. So he's a big deal. And Cicero... didn't like him at all. He thought he was a brute. So eventually, there becomes another civil war between Antony and Octavian, which is the whole Cleopatra and Antony thing. That's another play. That's the end. That's the end of it. Right. But before it, there's a very famous speech by Cicero where he basically just says Antony is incompetent, a savage, a brute, like worthless, horrible, awful, and he does it in like the most amazing way, and it's the last thing he ever wrote.
Oh no. So now he was critical of Caesar though, similarly as well.
Yes, but Antony couldn't take a joke.
Okay, well,
this wasn't even a joke. This was just over criticism and a borderline call to violence, and was just like this. I've worked with this guy for years, and he's garbage. So Antony does what any reasonable Roman does, and he sends centurions after him and has his hands chopped off and nailed to the forum door.
Ooh, that's bad for a writer.
That's bad for. Well, I mean, he's also very dead.
Oh, it's bad for anybody.
You know, he's killed, and then his hands are nailed to the forum door. But this is like the.
That's how Cicero got it?
That's how Cicero got it. Originally, Antony wanted to pour gold down his throat, molten gold.
So
that was a
for someone who doesn't like theatrics. That's fairly theatrical.
Oh, he was pretty theatrical about his stuff. He had all kinds of ideas about.
I feel I'm gonna make a note. I want to talk about Mark Antony some other time.
Yeah, he's a very fascinating character too, because while he is this brutal guy, he was very, very, very effective and very well loved by his soldiers because he was a soldier's soldier.
Sure.
Fight from the front, and he was very brave.
Yeah.
Very well played in the TV series Rome too. Yeah. James Purefoy does an amazing job in that.
It's a good series. You haven't checked it out. I only saw the first season.
It's great. He's major character in the first season.
Yeah.
The second season, they start talking about the thing with Cicero.
Oh, I should probably watch that.
It's very interesting. But yeah, so we have this kind of evolution of acting and then blending in politics. And at the same time, though, tragedy stops being as popular because the upper classes are more focused on other things. They have their fancy parties and their fancy orgies.
Yes.
But
no time for tragedy, folks. I got an orgy to attend.
And then they start having all these grandiose works, like they have the Colosseum.
Yeah.
And blood sport is super popular with the Romans because they're a warrior culture. Yeah. They love killing, and they love watching people kill each other. Their favorite thing is to watch Roman captured like from other countries, so they've been enslaved by the Romans to kill each other, reenacting famous Roman battles. So their theater becomes violence.
So this is like, hey, you want to go to a football game, or you want to watch a reflective George Bernard Shaw theatrical production?
Exactly. But imagine the football game is, instead of pads, they have armor, and instead of a football, they all have pointy things, and they run at each other. Stabby. So their version of theater then too is they take on battles like that they fought before, and they have them reenact these battles, but for real. So it's not like our Civil War reenactments where, you pew.
Oh, people who actually get killed.
They murder each other. They just take gladiators and they have them just murder each other. And it sucked. Like if you drew the short straw, you had to fight. You had to play the losing side.
So like the Civil War reenactors going, I gotta play the South.
Yeah. At Appomattox, great.
Oh,
this
boy.
sucks. But yeah, so they'd have like the Battle of like Zama. Or I'm trying to think of a really good one. Any one of the ones where it was like Carthage against the Romans, the Carthaginians largely won.
Yeah.
So if you had to play the Romans, you just got crushed. Zama, I think, was the only one where they're like, this is when the Carthaginians lost.
Yeah.
So you'd get the short straw, like, so you're going to play the Romans, and in the scenario, the Romans got surrounded and massacred. Have fun.
You think would they do those in Blazing Romes, or do they try to spin it so it's good for Rome?
Depended.
Okay.
Usually they tried to be accurate to show it as a historical event.
I see.
And so they'd stack the odds horribly against it. It was usually like, this gladiator team kind of sucks, and we'll just send them out.
I had heard also they would reenact water battles.
Yes, they could flood the Colosseum. So they'd have naval battles, full ship battles. They would do is it Actium or Antium? Can't remember which one. But that was the one where Antony lost his fleet off the coast of Egypt. They would reenact that one all the time. So it's Roman on Roman kind of a thing. They had all of this. That was their theater then for a long time. Was that they started to shift away from artistic to just violence. So as much like simulated violence is pretty cool. But what if we made it real?
What if it was real?
We could make a fortune. So they make all this money, and it keeps the people happy. Because as long as the people are happy, you can go off and do whatever you want. So we've got this growth from Thespis being like, let's tragedy. We'll talk about art and pain, and we'll show a healthy way of dealing with this and talking about this. And then the Romans kind of take it and go, okay, well, let's adapt it to theater. Like, they'll take theater and put it into politics, and then we'll take out the funny bits and just leave that to the poor people. But what if, instead of fake violence, we have real violence, and we make it theatrical?
It's just an escalation in general. Like, what's the next? What's the
next step? And the Romans are very bad about that too, where they're like, we want more, we want bigger and more.
We could do it worse. Don't worry. We can make it.
How can we make it better? So we had politicians doing it. Now if we did it at grand scale, and everybody has real weapons, this is a great idea. And it was horribly expensive, but it was distracting. And then if you're the emperor, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Because 90% of the people, they're watching the games. They'd have whole events just called talking about bread and games. Oh. As long as you throw out bread to the masses and keep them entertained, happy. And that's very true throughout history. People are happy and fed.
What's that phrase? Bread and circuses?
I think so. They always call it bread and games.
Circuses.
Bread and games, circuses. It didn't matter as long as people are fed. It's kind of the keep them fat, keep them happy, keep them stupid.
Think of that while you're streaming Netflix.
Yeah. I got really aggressive. It's like after this, I'm going home and I'm watching Netflix. But so that's what the Romans start to use it, and then we see this very drastic fall off of art in general, because the Romans have made it all about like violence and murder.
Well, can you imagine trying to be an actor? Be like, well, I could be an actor. I mean, I might have to perform at the Coliseum. Oh, that's exciting. Yeah. Oh, no, you don't understand. I'm playing the losing side. This is the end of my career.
This is a killer crowd at night. Rodney Dangerfield, I get no respect. They throw a spear at him. Oh, God. And you didn't want that.
No.
And then your other option for acting was the low acting, which is, you're naked and doing stupid stuff, and it's never... You're a clown,
sure.
And also hated, and like barely you live worse than a lot of slaves in the city of Rome.
Yeah, but you get to perform naked though.
And maybe catch a bunch of diseases.
Yeah, maybe.
Because if you're that poor, you don't get to live in the nice houses with all the plumbing.
You're
not living well. So after the fall of the Roman Empire, we see this big fall off of any kind of theater and art, because a big lesson learned from the Romans is this decadent society stuff doesn't work. We can't have like mass coliseums of murder. And then also the Catholic Church is rising up.
Okay.
So they're anti-violence.
Anti-public murder.
Anti-public murder, unless it's somebody else. If it's other cultures and religions, totally fine.
Let's not murder for entertainment. We have to have a reason.
We have to have a purpose. Yes.
Sure.
Not just for casual fun. This is not entertaining. Even though it kind of is. But it's not entertaining.
I know you're all enjoying this.
You're all enjoying it.
This is not.
But that's sinful and wrong.
Okay. Sure.
So don't. So the Catholic Church basically puts a moratorium on all forms of higher art. Art stops being lifelike. And you see this throughout the Middle Ages. If you look at any kind of art, the people are almost always like from the side. They don't look very human. Yeah. They look kind of like aliens. They got the big bulbous heads and stuff. They're anatomically incorrect. And largely this is because the idea is only God should be creating man in that image. Man's job is to not do that. Like, we're not supposed to try to replicate what God has created. This is sinful behavior, and only God is the creator. And obviously this is not every Catholic on the planet, but this was largely pushed by the Pope and the papacy, who ruled everything. And art kind of goes away. And that's why then in the Renaissance, art comes back in a big way, because they're like, oh my God, have you seen what the Greeks did? Who's this guy? Thespis? Have you heard of him? He's amazing. He takes all these individual characters and he goes, I'm going to do that. And that brings us to the big one you mentioned, which was the Commedia dell'arte.
Yeah.
And they take it a step further and they bring back tragedy. And then they also create improvisational acting and comedy. They use masks in their art. They bring women onto the stage to play women parts, but not just for the purpose of sex. Which
you hear that, girls? Thing. You're welcome.
You're welcome. Comedians did this. I don't know. So you've got this evolution, and then the next step just across the pond is England, and that's when they have their art renaissance with Shakespeare. And he starts to use the term thespian in his plays. Oh. And that becomes even more common because they invoke Thespis almost like a god. You get these kinds of theater people who invoke it like it's this mystical, magical being. But it was this guy who just said, maybe we should just take this part. Yeah. And it's crazy to see like how far people take this idea and they move it from maybe we're going to tell a story to. I'm going to tell a story, and I'm going to use politics into it, and you start breeding in violence and all this other stuff, and then you take this concept of the chorus away, and you say, well, what if we just reenact this stuff, because what do people really like? And it becomes less about the art and more about like the effect it has on people. And that's kind of the Pandora's box of it, is he wants to tell these stories, and his intentions are pure, but you take this and you can kind of twist it around, and then you wind up with this like kind of just a dearth of art. There's not really much being created in big chunks of Europe. There are still parts of Europe that are very artistic. Eastern Europe still had the Byzantine Empire, which was doing all kinds of amazing things with mosaics and paintings, and they did triptychs, all kinds of stuff, or triptychs, not triptograph, that's different, but a triptych was like a three-piece. Three paintings put together, and they're always like religious, and that was a way they could get around it. Is artists for a while could go, well, I'm not supposed to do people, but I can do stuff about God.
Yeah.
So that's how they would channel it. And then there was this fight back against it. You had the bonfire, the vanities, and this big push by the Catholic Church again to say this is sinful and bad. And then somehow you work through the years of either a conservative, maintain, don't change, don't be artistic because that pushes the boundaries, and then this very, we want to be artful, and there's a balance between trying to not go too far. You don't want to go so far as the Romans did,
right?
Where, well, just kill everybody in stage. It's fun, and
it's for the show.
Don't tell any stories at all. You've got to be able to tell stories and tell them responsibly.
Yeah.
And we can see that in like the history, which is what's fascinating about it. Is you got Thespis, who obviously told a great story, and in a really remarkable way, to such an extent that to this day we remember his name 2,500 years later. He's still referenced daily by people. There are Thespian societies.
Yeah.
And then you could take it a little further and look at like when politicians take a concept like this of I'm going to embody a character, and they can do it for good or evil and right or wrong, and say I don't necessarily believe this thing, but I'm going to push this idea, and I'm going to be really aggressive about it, or I'm going to be really blasé about it, and it can really guide how people see things, because that's that whole political theater thing.
Yeah.
And that was starting to be perfected by the Romans, and then it's just kind of gotten to be, we just expect it to happen, as opposed to leave the entertainment to the entertainers, leave this to that, and kind of have a good balance in the two. I wonder sometimes, like, what would Thespis think if he found out, like, how acting is done?
How things have progressed, I don't know.
Things have progressed. It's very interesting, too.
I mean, I think he probably wouldn't like some of the middle parts.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, now it'd be okay.
And then I think he'd watch a Marvel movie and go, that's wild! Like, look at that craziness! I mean, and it's cool, though, because, like, some of those things, you can find, like, a crazy, nuanced, brilliant performance. Like Josh Brolin as Thanos, where he's a big purple dude. Who would have thought? And he's like embodies this crazy world destroying guy, and you're like, yeah, I believe it, I buy it. That's true. And then you can have like a random person on the street in a different movie that's more artistic not be as convincing somehow. It's because there's this level of respect that came out of acting, where it started out one way, it kind of evolved, and then when you took that away for hundreds of years, people really started to respect it more. And we haven't had like after art started to come back, people weren't treated like garbage again. They still are by a lot of people, but it wasn't the societal you are filth, because all of society says you're filth anymore. And it's nice to see this resurgence from this, and then also be able to see the progress we've made from, well, I just want to play like one dude outside of the chorus, to giant spaceship laser battles and
and acting as a full career variety of
it's a totally viable path. It's really fascinating.
Well done, Thespis of Icaria.
Yeah, you made stuff awesome, and also still managed to talk about warfare, genocide, and murder while talking about Thespis. I feel a little bit of shame,
but
some pride.
Talk about what you know.
Talk about what you know.
All right. So you made it. Will.
Yep, I made it. I made it. I was worried I wouldn't have enough because he's got no information. There's very little about it. And then I found out half of what we know is lies. So I had to be very like, oh, okay, well, this I know for sure.
If you have any comments on what we've just learned, feel free to comment.
Please let us know. Yeah.
You can check us out on a YouTube station, which I'll put in the link later.
Yep.
I'll do that later.
Well, and also we need to get 100 subscribers, and then we can just make it This Week in History with Mike and Will. Until then, it's 135GH.
We'll work on it. We'll do a subscriber drive at some point.
Yeah,
we are going to get together next week, Wednesday, not Thursday, because I'm going to be out of town. So we're gonna.
And I have a play.
Oh yeah, he was going to play.
Yeah, I'm going to play. Thanks, Thespis. Appreciate it.
Thespian. So we'll be doing that on December 1st, which is my half birthday, by the way.
Oh, well, happy half birthday.
The only reason I know is because of my daughter's actual birthday. We have a little thing. We have a little arrangement. All right, so next week we are discussing what?
We are discussing the fascinating Baron Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben. Baron. He's a baron.
Any little preview on that? Germany, years.
Oh,
it sounds German.
He is actually featured in the American Revolutionary War.
Oh.
And we're going to find out why he matters. Because he is an unsung character within that story, and we'll find out why he matters, because it's a super big deal, and you'll be very surprised. So nobody.
Don't spoil it. I'm not gonna look. I won't look it up.
I am excited about this one. This one, I actually have been planning this one for a month.
Oh wow!
I just wanted to look it up. I don't have the right notebook here, but I've been planning this one for a month because my brother mentioned this man to me, and I started doing research on him. And this was about a year ago. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And then I had to find an excuse to talk about him. So we're actually going to be talking about him on the anniversary of his passing, which was November 28th. But we're going to talk about his life, who this guy was, and why he's important.
I'm looking forward to it.
I am too.
All right, if you're watching this on YouTube in the future, like and subscribe, blah, blah, blah.
Blah, 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 blah.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
We love you all. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.
Bye.